Into record.
Okay, let's get started. It's been a month since we last got together. I hope that everyone had a good Chinese New Year. Now, in the last class, we talked about consciousness in the context of Vipassana. In this class, we're going to discuss consciousness from the perspective of the Abhidhamma. And as we've mentioned before, consciousness never arises alone. It's never just by itself. It's always together with Cittasikas. And consciousness plus Cittasikas, that is what we call Cittas. Now, the first book of the Abhidhamma, the Dhammasangani, this was finalized around 2,000 years ago, about 500 years after the Buddha's parinibbana. This book of the Abhidhamma lists all 89 Cittas with their Cittasikas. So this aspect of classification of Cittas is part of the original Abhidhamma thinking. It's an original feature of Abhidhamma thinking. A lot of stuff that we'll be talking about happened later in commentaries and in the Abhidhamma Sangaha, but this is actually from the original Abhidhamma, though, as I'll mention later, how they intended it is not exactly clear. So, a citta is a conditioned, impermanent phenomena. It's a combination of consciousness and Cittasikas. It arises and passes away with each sense impression. So imagine like a movie reel as an analogy. I just want to make clear that, like all analogies, this gives a general idea, but don't take it too literally. If you critique it too much, it'll fall apart. But imagine a movie reel. Each frame of the film, each flicker is a citta contributing to the overall movie of experience. Now, 25 years ago or so, I created this citta chart, this map of the mind, and I have distributed it over many, many years. Many of you have probably seen this citta chart. But my wife saw this and she complained, hey, you should add color to make it clearer. And why not split it into 2 pages to make the text larger? And so I did. And so now I use this 2 A4 size page citta chart. The first page are the sense sphere cittas. These are cittas, if you can read the numbers, 1 to 54. And the second page are the jhana cittas. Now, in the jhana cittas, you'll see that there are 3 categories: fine material sphere jhanas, immaterial sphere jhanas, and supramundane. It's important to recognize that the supramundane, the path and fruit cittas, have the level of absorption, level of concentration that is attributed to jhanas. So they actually are jhana cittas in the broadest sense because of the level of absorption. The difference is that in the supramundane, what the object of absorption, of concentration, is nibbana, rather than, in the case of fine material or immaterial sphere, some concept. All right. So let's just look at the first one, the sense sphere cittas. We'll focus on it first. I don't think we're going to get through it all today, but when we are finished this with the sense sphere cittas, then we'll move to a more detailed analysis of the jhana cittas. So these are the 54 sense sphere cittas that operate in ordinary, non-jhanic consciousness. When I say ordinary, This includes meditation. This includes the highest levels of meditation, except jhana, except path and fruition. So it's got a very, very broad application. Um, Very, very broad application. Just does not include the absorption of jhana. It includes sensing, thinking, deciding, life continuum, and vipassana. All the vipassana insights are here, except for the highest insights, which are path and fruition. All of the insights are on this chart. All right. The um, Chittas number 1 to 12, those are in the unwholesome red. They are involved in sensing process, in thinking process. 13 to 27, they are involved in sensing only. 31 to 38, those are the sense sphere wholesome. The green ones up in the top right corner, they are for in the sensing process and the thinking process. Number 28, down in the rootless functional at the bottom middle, that is adverting only in the sensing. And number 29, determining, is for sensing and thinking. 39 to 46 apply to those are the registration or life continuum chittas. I quickly run over it here, but we're going to go through it in a lot more detail. Right? Here is your traditional way of presenting the sense door process, where you've got life continuum 39 to 46, adverting number 28, sensing 13 to 27, determining number 29, the karma creating either the unwholesome 1 to 12 or the wholesome 31 to 38, followed by registration 39 to 46, and then reverting back to life continuum 39 to 46 again. Now, this order, this sequence of chittas proceeds according to what is called Citta Niyama, the law of consciousness. The law of consciousness is a later commentarial term that is used to describe the natural sequence, the natural law of the way in which chittas arise one after another. So you don't get sensing arising immediately after life continuum. You need to have adverting in between. That's Citta Niyama. There's other natural laws in the commentary. Utu Niyama, or climate, that is like weather and temperature. Bija Niyama, plants. Kama Niyama, unwholesome karma creates unwholesome resultant. The Citta Niyama here and the Dhamma Niyama, there are certain fixed things that happen in the life of a Buddha. Those are examples of different types of niyamas. It's a later commentarial term, not analyzed in detail, just kind of grouped together. Now, traditionally, when I'm discussing these chittas, I start with number 1. We analyze the attachment-rooted, unprompted, with wrong view, pleasant feeling, analyze that chitta. Then I go to number 2. I do them in numerical order. But actually, this numerical order is from the Abhidhamma Sangaha, which is about 1,000 years ago, about 1,500 years after the Buddha. For the first 1,500 years, and in the original Abhidhamma texts and the Visuddhimagga, they didn't use this sequence. They started with number 31, the sense sphere wholesome chittas, and then they went through the others. So what I am going to do is I'm not going to start with number 1 here. I am going to organize this discussion according to the flow in the sense door process. Now, which means starting with life continuum, then adverting, sensing, determining, and so on. So on the side, you see a kind of a flow chart there, and that is kind of like your bookmark of where we are in the discussion. Now, when looking at the original Abhidhamma texts, they list all 89 chittas, but it never provides context to explain where they came up with all these, why they are grouped together, why they're organized this way. It wasn't until much, much later, about 1500 years later, that the sequence was articulated in the Abhidhamma Sangaha, the sense door sequence, the mind door sequence process, death process, jhana process. Those you won't find in the first 1500 years, but they must have had something, some reason to list all these 89 Cittas. I suspect that my personal guess is that the compilers of the Abhidhamma did have processes in mind, but they weren't finalized at that time. They couldn't get agreement. And so it was never written down or made canonical. They listed all the Cittas, but the organization of the Cittas didn't come till much, much later. That's my own personal theory. But what we're going to do now is present in the sequence, in the order of the sense door process. Of course, there's also a mind door process, and in many ways, the mind door process is much more important than the sense door process because most of the karma that is created comes from the mind door process. If we take a look, we see that the last half of the two processes from number 20, determining or mind door adverting, chitta number 29 onwards is identical. The only difference between the sense door process and the mind door process is after the life continuum, you've got adverting and sensing in the sense door process. You don't have that in the mind door process. It just jumps right into the mind door adverting. Right? So those are we'll come back to the different process later. So I've covered this Citta chart, but I want to make a couple of points. Only arahats can experience Citta number 30, which is at the very bottom of the rootless functional. That is it's called the smile producing for arahat. And this appears in a mind door process of an arahat in place of the karma creating. When an arahat smiles, then rather than 47 to 54, you get number 30. The other aspect that is only for arahats are those cittas 47 to 54. They are the functional. Now they do the same role as 31 to 38, the beautiful sense sphere wholesome cittas, except unlike 31 to 38, which create new karma, 47 to 54 are unrelated to karma. They don't create new karma. Now, switching to a little bit more practicality, during Vipassana, what is observed is not individual cittas. So, nor the entire process analytically. You can't watch the whole process, but rather the characteristics of arising nama and rupa. That is what is experienced during Vipassana. When noting, we do not discern individual cittas, but we train to see that each noted event is conditioned, momentary, and impersonal. This analytical framework from the Abhidhamma, it supports right view. In other words, supports the idea that there is seeing without a seer, thinking without a thinker, and so on, without a self, but it's not the object of insight. All right, before I jump into the life continuum, any questions on what I have covered so far? Okay. Can somebody say something so I know that I'm being heard?
Thank you, Brother Rob.
Okay, thank you. Good. I'm glad that. So hopefully what I've presented so far is clear. Now we're going to go into the sense sphere resultant. These are the light green, the life continuum cittas. They are found in the middle right column and in the middle section, the middle row, number 39 to 45. And looking at the on the roadmap here, You are here at the beginning, the life continuum. We're beginning the process. So this is just kind of an orientation of where we are. Now, the the function of the life continuum, Citta, is to quote, fill in the gaps when there is no sensing process or thinking process happening. Now, we can be indirectly aware of life continuum when we recognize that time has passed during dreamless sleep. So, another time when there's a lot of these life continuum Cittas is during dreamless sleep. The mind is not active, it's only passive. During dreams, the mind is active. The sense door and the mind door are active, just not as clear perhaps as during when waking hours, but it's still active. During dreamless sleep, the mind is passive. I remember Bhante Sujiva, I asked him during an interview, I said, is there any way for a yogi to be aware of which life continuum Citta they have? And what Bhante Sujiva said is that if a yogi is really well trained in Chitta Nupassana and has a lot of experience in focusing on Chitta Nupassana during a retreat, when they first wake up in the morning, they can be aware of what was recently happening, the Citta that was recently happening. They can't dissect in detail, but they can generally be aware of the nature of that Citta. So, but in general, it's not directly known during sleep, but it's inferred else afterwards. Another analogy, again, not perfect, but when projecting a film, in between the different frames coming on, there are 24 frames or 60 frames per second. In between the frames, the light stays on. And that light staying on, even though there is nothing on the screen, no film, that is the life continuum or Bhavanga Citta. So let's do the first Citta arising in a new existence called the Patasandhi Citta or the rebirth linking Citta is a specific life continuum Citta. So it'll be either 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, or 46. So in the current life, the first Citta that arises is this Patasandhi rebirth linking Citta, and it is of this sense sphere resultant type. Now, that Citta is the result of the karma which gave rise to the current existence. So, in the case of us as humans, it's wholesome because we're lucky to be born human, and whatever karma drove us to be in this existence, it's the result of that karma which gave this rebirth linking Citta or the sense sphere resultant, the life continuum Citta. It's the result of that karma. Now, during life, there are countless sensing processes and thinking processes, and each process is preceded and succeeded by life continuum Cittas that are identical to the rebirth linking Citta. Absolutely identical. In other words, if you were born with a 39 as your Citta number 39 as your life continuum Citta, that's the one that is going to fill in all the gaps between processes throughout your entire life. So you're stuck with a 39 all through your life. And the last Citta in the current life, the death Citta, Chuti Citta, also will be a life continuum, which is identical to the rebirth linking Citta. So the karma that drove us into this existence gives rise to the rebirth linking Citta, all the life continuum Cittas in between processes, and the Chuti Citta, which ends our life. Okay. So all life continuum Cittas take this are of the same type, the same Citta number. So if you're born with a 39, it'll always be 39. They're all the result of the same wholesome karma, and they all take the same object. Now, the object is a karma, some karma that drove you into this existence, is some good karma that you did in your previous existence, a sign of karma that you did in your previous existence, or a sign of destiny. And I'll get into those details later when I talk about rebirth, but right now we're just talking about the sense door process. The life continuum of the Cittas in the current life are different from the life continuum Cittas in the old life and the life continuum Cittas in the next life. So you see here in the diagram, old life, the life continuum Cittas, the Chuti Citta has got a downward stroke. And in the next life, the life rebirth linking Citta has got an upward stroke, and the downward stroke and the upward stroke are different from the life continuum Cittas in this life. So you may have had a 40 in the previous life, and this life, throughout this life, you've got a 39, and then the next life you may get a 41. Now it's possible that you go back to another 40. It's up, I mean, it's possible that you get another 39 or another 40, but it will be the result of different karma, the karma that drove you into the next existence. All right. Now, life continuum Cittas are the result of past wholesome karma that led to rebirth as a human. Just as a clarification, though, congenitally disabled humans, people with born deaf, born blind, this is not people who became deaf or blind in the womb or because of sickness later. It's where there actually were no eye organ or sense organ or ear organ from initial conception, or beings in four woeful planes and Brahmas have different Cittas performing the function of life continuum. It's not between 39 and 46. It's a different number. I don't want to go into all those technical details, but I should also mention that congenitally disabled people, like those are born deaf and blind, they can be very intelligent and develop themselves a lot spiritually, practice jhana, practice samatha, but they're not they don't have the strength to get jhana or get sainthood. Okay, going a little bit more into the Cittas here on the chart. There are 8 life continuum Cittas classified according to unprompted or prompted, with or without understanding, pleasant or neutral feeling. I'm using emojis to represent the feeling. Happy face is pleasant feeling. Neutral, flat face is a neutral feeling. So these are the 8 different, and you've got every combination of prompting or unprompting, understand with or without understanding, pleasant neutral feeling, and that comes up with the 8 different life continuum Cittas. Let's look at them one by one. Unprompted versus prompted. The unprompted types reflect stronger underlying volitional force in the past karma. Prompted types reflect weaker or externally supported volitional force in generating karma. So the karma that led to the rebirth, the productive karma that led to rebirth in this existence and carries out through the entire life continuum. An unprompted one happens because in the previous life, the karma creating Citta was unprompted, meaning it was spontaneous, it was naturally arising. Prompted is when the Citta that led to rebirth in this existence required inducement or support, either your own support or somebody else's support to arise. So the way that this shows up, a person with a unprompted life continuum Citta, they may have natural initiative. Those people are more likely to be more likely. This isn't a guarantee, but it's a inclination or initial orientation tendency. They tend to be take more initiative, whereas people whose life continuum Citta is prompted, they tend to rely on encouragement to get things done. Um, Another way of looking at it is spontaneous, wholesome inclination versus responsiveness after prompting. In other words, a unprompted life continuum, that kind of person will just quickly offer dana or immediately go for meditation. The unprompted, you may need a bit of pushing. It's subtle, not rigidly deterministic. This is a tendency rather than a fixed personality trait throughout their existence. Now, we move to with and without understanding. With understanding, which means that the life continuum is associated with panya, which is the understanding Citta, the Achetasika. That person has greater innate clarity of comprehension. They naturally see things clearly. And wisdom can arise more clearly when conditions support it. And there's a stronger capacity for understanding Dhamma. For these kinds of people, it's possible for them, with the right other conditions, to attain jhana or enlightenment. Now, in my opinion, the people who are attending this class are going to be unprompted. In other words, you come here because you spontaneously wanted you to. It's unlikely that you come class after class after class because somebody's pushing you along. There's a spontaneity to it. And secondly, there is an orientation, a capacity of understanding the Dhamma, of being oriented to the Dhamma. So I suspect that the people who are coming to this class are, and generally seem to be a pretty happy lot. And so quite likely number 39, in my opinion. Your life continuum Citta is probably 39. If you're a more serious person, maybe 43 as a sense sphere resultant life continuum Citta. People, and I'm sure you've met across people like this, if their life continuum is disassociated from panya, then yeah, the intellectual capacity may still exist conventionally. They can be incredibly intelligent, but the penetrative insight is not strongly supported. In other words, they don't naturally kind of incline into insight meditation, but it can still be developed to a great degree. For these people, jhana or enlightenment is impossible in this existence. All right, they cannot because attain jhana or enlightenment because the underlying character of the life continuum is incompatible with the jhana Citta and the enlightenment Citta, the path. The fruit and path Cittas. All right, pleasant or neutral feeling. If the life continuum is accompanied by a pleasant feeling, the mind is generally more cheerful. The emotional resilience may be stronger. Wholesome joy arises more easily. If it's accompanied by a neutral feeling, the mind's mood is more neutral. Emotional life may be steadier but less exuberant. So the pleasant or neutral feeling of the life continuum Citta influences the underlying current of existence, not a constant mood. In other words, it's your base starting point. It's not your mood at any particular moment. Because remember, this is the Citta, life continuum Citta, starts from the moment of conception to the time of moving to the next existence. It's not based on a mood or on circumstances. It's just like a underlying current. All right. Now, the lifespan of the um, sense object, according to the Abhidhamma, is 17 cheetahs. We don't see this, by the way, until the Abhidhamma Sangaha, 1500 years after the Buddha. Um, so I think this is very specific to this sensing process. It's not part of the original Abhidhamma texts, but it was a later clarification um, on the all these 89 cheetahs. So that's the duration of the sensing process. It starts with 3 life continuum and ends with registration. There are 3, it starts with a 3 life continuum. There is what's called the past life continuum, which is the start of a new sensing process, a vibrational life continuum, which is indirect awareness of the sense object, and a resting life continuum, which is the last step before changing direction. What does this mean? Before the sense object arises, there's a whole stream of perhaps millions of these life continuum cheetahs. But then once the sense object arises during the past life continuum, the mind is still caught up in whatever life continuum it was doing before, no change. But when we get to the vibrational life continuum, there's some indirect awareness of a sense object. The way analogy that they use in the commentary is that if you put a bit of rice on the skin of a drum and you tap the drum at one point, the rice is going to vibrate naturally. It's not because you tapped the rice, but it's because it's somehow indirect awareness. And then once there's indirect awareness, before the mind can switch to actually processing whatever sense object there is, it has to take one last step. They use an analogy in the commentaries of when somebody is running and they're told to stop, they got to take one step before they can stop after hearing the word stop. Okay. Now, the past and vibrational or resting, they're identical to all the other life continuum. So they still take that old object of the whatever brought you into this life. They're still the 39 or the 43, whatever it is, your life continuum. They're still the same as all of those, but they're just given separate names before when they arise after the sense object has come into existence. All right. Before we move to the adverting and leave the life continuum, any questions on life continuum, Jikas?
Brother Rob, how
Yes.
about those people who is like of Down syndrome?
Okay. Down syndrome, that's a genetic thing. It is definitely a comic thing. All right. For those people, I suspect that most of them would be without understanding. Um, Most of them would not have the ability to immediately grasp. But there was an example from the commentary. Um, there was a monk who, after 3 months of studying, could not even recite a single verse of the Buddhist teachings. Okay. I mean, that is how, I'll use the word stupid he was. He was not even able to memorize. And you're got to keep in mind, at the time of the Buddha, everything was by memorizing what the teacher said. So after 3 months, this guy was not even able to give one quote from the Buddha after having interacted with the Buddha the whole time. All right. So this was a very, quote, stupid person. What the Buddha did is gave him a clear white piece of cloth and told him to wipe his hands with it. What the quote, stupid person did, he wiped his hands on the cloth and he saw that it became dirty. And that was the trigger to recognize impermanence, that the cleanliness, the whiteness was not permanent, and he gained sainthood. So even at the time of the Buddha, a monk who was, quote, stupid could still gain enlightenment. Is it likely that a person with Down syndrome could gain enlightenment? Maybe not likely, but possible. Possible that they could gain enlightenment or attain jhana. All right. So that's how I would characterize those people. They're not considered to be congenitally disabled. Congenitally disabled means that when at the moment you're conceived, you don't even have that sense organ. So blind or deaf would be examples, or they don't even have the ability to speak, or dumb, inability to speak. But I would say that a person with Down syndrome would not be considered to be congenitally disabled. But the odds are, my guess would be, though not impossible, difficult for them to attain jhana or sainthood, but possible, according to the commentary. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions on the life continuum? Okay. We'll now move to the adverting, the 5 sense door adverting. And that is in the middle section, the rootless cittas that are unrelated to karma. Okay, so what this means is that they are rootless, which means that they do not have I should make one comment. The sense sphere resultant, they do have alobha and adosa, meaning non-attachment, non-greed, as roots. So they are considered beautiful. That's why they're green. The blue, the middle column, are rootless, so they don't have any wholesome roots. They don't have any unwholesome roots. And this group here, the functional ones, is unrelated to karma. They're not the result of karma, and they don't create new karma. We're talking specifically about number 28, the sense door adverting, 5 sense door adverting. So on the map of where you are on the map, we are at the leaving the life continuum and starting the process of the sense door. You'll notice that this does not exist in the mind door process because it's not needed. You don't have to go to the sense door to grab the object. Now, the function of the sense door, 5 sense door averting citta, it interrupts the life continuum. It now takes whatever sense object is there as the object, and it orients the stream of consciousness, steers, guides like a rudder to the relevant sense door. Says, okay, time to see, time to hear. We may think that we see and hear at the same time, but actually the seeing process and the hearing process are not happening in parallel. They're in rapid succession. You see, eye door process that visible object. Hear through the ear door process the sound or the music or the voice, whatever. It happens sequentially. And so the role of the 5 sense door adverting, it's like in one of those train switching stations. One track comes in, and then you can switch to any of the 5 tracks. The eye, go to the eye door, the ear door, nose door, tongue door, body door. And when we're talking about the eye door, we're talking about specifically at the retina or the sensitive part of the eye, the ear door, like the eardrum, the sensitive part of the ear, nose door. So it's really shifting the mind's consciousness to some part of the physical body, one of the organs of the physical body. Okay. Now, that the eye sensitivity is created by the sensitive part of the eye and how powerful it is, that's created by karma. But the which sense door to open, that's unrelated to karma. It's not because of karma that one sees or hears. It is this decision as to which one the mind attends to is not because of karma. The adverting citta is not the result of past karma, doesn't create new karma. It happens because the decision is based on a present object, not a past object or a future object, arising at the sense door. And the object has to be of sufficient intensity, has to be powerful enough, impactful enough to grab the attention of the mind. As we mentioned earlier, the sense object exists for 17 cittas. If the object that comes in really grabs the attention of the mind, then it is called very great. And there is sufficient time for registration within the time constraint of 17 cittas. However, if it's not quite very great, but only great, then what happens is the whole process gets delayed a little bit. The five sense door adverting delays because it needs to build up some momentum before start processing. And as soon as it delays, because it requires a present object, by the time the 17 mind moments are finished for the sense object, there's no time for any registration. So what would be an example of this? Right now I'm looking at my computer screen, and so the visual image coming in from all the dots of color related to the computer screen are going to be very great objects because there's a lot of attention to them. However, out of the side of my eye, there is a wall. There is a cup. All right. I'm not concentrating on that cup. I only noticed it because I switched my view, but it was still there. It wouldn't have been registered. So it would have been, that object of the cup or the wall is great. It's not very great. What are the implications of this? A very great object, it progresses into many subsequent processes, mind door processes, where I glue them all together. We went through this a few times. It glues together all the dots of color, creates a whole big picture, shapes, names, recognizing, and then associating. All that kind of stuff happens when the object is very great. However, until I mentioned it, the visual dots of color that came from the cup beside me weren't registered. They were simply great. Yes, the eye could see them, but not great. There may have been some karma associated with that if the object is great, but it ended just at the sense door process. If the object is even less of an object of attention, it captures even less attention, then it will be slight. There's no time for karma creating cittas. So the whole process is delayed so long that even before you get to the karma creating cittas, the sense object has already gone away. And the very slight, you don't even have time for the five sense door adverting citta. You're just vibrating the bhavanga, that's all. And so completely unnoticed. So these objects are the five sense door adverting will delay until there's enough power to capture the attention. So all right, I'm done with the adverting. Any questions on the adverting citta number 28 before we start moving to the sensing citta?
Ralph,
Yeah.
would the underlying habits able to catch the five sense door everything stuff?
With the underlying which?
Habits that we normally
Okay.
have.
Excellent question. No. Sorry. Sorry, I won't say no. I'll take it back. Not really. Your underlying habits are basically, when you say habit, normally it's something that you have trained on, developed, and so on. But is your eye going to be more sensitive? I mean, it's going to be based on the sensitivity of the eye. So, for example, as I get a little older, my eye sensitivity is getting weaker. Sorry. And my ear sensitivity may be getting a little bit weaker. And so it may take more work to build up the enough attention. So I may not be quite as quick to see things. My reaction time may be a little slower when seeing or hearing because my eye and my ear are not quite as sensitive. So this isn't habits in the traditional sense, but it can build up. Here I talked about on the negative side. On the positive side, if one has really developed oneself in meditation, then what happens is the senses appear more sensitive. They for a short time they can appear more sensitive. I remember somebody asked me a few years ago, why is it that during a retreat, things appear to work in slow motion? I can see something falling. It's because the eye is becoming more sensitive because there's more mindfulness. This is not so much at the five sense or adverting, but more at the determining. And we're going to go into this in a lot of detail when we get to the determining consciousness, how habits play a major factor of the wise attention and unwise attention at that stage. But I wouldn't say that habits play a big role here, but there are other factors that can influence the quote sensitivity to the intensity of the object.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions on number 28? Okay. We'll now move to the sensing chittas, number 13 to 27. These are unwholesome resultant or wholesome resultant. They are the result of some past karma, and they are rootless, meaning they are extremely, all the chittas we talked about so far are incredibly simple. Incredibly simple, just doing a very, very, very basic function that they keep repeating doing again and again and again. It's not till we get further on that we get a little bit more complexity at the determining, and then a lot of complexity at the karma creating phase. So when we see eye consciousness or the whole sensing chittas here, they are incredibly I mean, one shouldn't read too much into their function. One shouldn't ascribe too much power to these chittas. They're so simple, so basic, so elemental. Where are we now? There are three chittas: the sense consciousness chitta, the receiving consciousness, and the investigating consciousness in sequence, that together making up the process of sensing. Again, doesn't occur in the mind door process, only in the sense door process. So for sensing chittas, there's one group where we've got one of five sense consciousness: eye, ear, nose, tongue, or body. They're one of those five, that then proceeds to receiving consciousness and investigating conscious. And that's the result of some past unwholesome karma. So some karma that we did in the past that was unwholesome, this is the result of it. And on the wholesome side, it's the exact same sequence: sense consciousness, one of five, receiving consciousness, and then investigating consciousness. But now there's two of them. That's the result of past wholesome karma. Some wholesome karma that we did in the past, this is the result of. Okay. So the karma, what can we say about it? What was the karma that led to a particular object being seen? There is no, all we can say about it is a sense sphere. It must have been a sense sphere karma. There's no relationship between, if I see a cup, it's because of something related to a cup in the past. No, that's not the way it works. It's a random, well, it must be sense sphere and must be powerful. It's a productive type of karma, rather than obstructive or supportive, but it's a productive type of karma. But it is a wholesome or unwholesome based on the nature of the object. It's based on the intrinsic nature of the object. So it's the object that determines whether, and the object can be determined as to be undesirable, desirable, or neutral or desirable. If you have a intrinsically undesirable object, then you get the unwholesome resultant. If you have a neutral or desirable object, an object that is intrinsically neutral or desirable, it is a result of some past wholesome karma. The way I see it is like we have created uncounted billions of wholesome and unwholesome karmic seeds that accompany us around like a cloud. And if what happens, we happen to have a unwholesome visual object impinge upon the eye door, then out of the cloud, some random unwholesome karma resultant, vipaka, will show up as sense consciousness, receiving consciousness, investigating consciousness. If we happen to have a pleasant object, sense consciousness, receiving, investigating will be of the pleasant type. But there's no way of tracing back or associating what karma created or that this is the result of. It's based on the intrinsic nature of the object. So what does the commentary say about where does this object intrinsic nature come from? It's kind of funny. In the commentary to the Vimanga, the second book of the Abhidhamma, it describes the object, this designation, as being in the eye of ordinary people. And it gives examples of accountants or government officials as being ordinary or mayors. So it's not somebody who is a unusual person. It's a, quote, normal person, like an accountant or a government official, that would designate this as undesirable, this object as being undesirable, neutral, or desirable. The way I see it, the most obvious example of this is when you come not to visible objects, because it's hard to tell when an object is, a visible object is pleasant or unpleasant, sorry, undesirable, or neutral, or desirable. But when it comes to body consciousness, when you feel, when you step on a tack, all right, or you get pinched by a needle, absolutely clear there is pain, unpleasant, it's painful, it's unpleasant body consciousness, the unpleasant feeling, that is the result of some past unwholesome karma. Perhaps nothing, well, no, it's nothing to do with needles or anything else. It's just a guaranteed pain is the result of, is an unwholesome resultant that is sensing it and processing it. Wholesome resultant, when there is pleasure, physical pleasure, okay, that is a wholesome resultant. So it's obvious to anyone, the body consciousness, Citta, either being unwholesome resultant with painful feeling, a body consciousness with wholesome resultant, that is a wholesome resultant with pleasure. Those are the absolute obvious ones. This is not to say that there aren't, say, masochists who take pleasure in pain. Pleasure in pain, the masochist would not be considered to be a, quote, ordinary person, like an accountant or a government official. All right. So this designation of the object as determining which stream is the is from the Abhidhamma. So let's look into the sense consciousness, the one of five, either 13 to 17, 20 to 24. Sense consciousness, chittas, arise at the sense base. Today, we call it retina for the eye, the rods and cones of the eye. Or we talk about the eardrum, the different, the membrane and the bones and the nerves in the ear. That's what we use today. At the time of the Buddha, they didn't use those type of terms. They just called it the sensitive part of the eye or the sensitive part of the ear. And there are also sensitive parts of the nose, tongue, and body. They didn't use biological terms like nerves, but that's how we can understand them today. Now, dependent on eye and visible forms, eye consciousness arises. So we talked about this sutta, the Madhupindika Sutta, number of times, and this is the first line, that when you have a working eye and a visible form impacts it, that is the condition for eye consciousness to arise. But actually, it requires four things. It needs the visible eye. Eye consciousness needs to be, the eye sensitivity, working eye, needs to have a visible form impinging upon that working eye. There needs to be light to transmit that object, and there needs to be attention. Attention is where we get to it need to have been averted to. The averting is attention. Okay, actually, in the Abhidhamma, in the commentary to the Abhidhamma, when they describe attention, they say there are three kinds of attention. There is mind door averting. There is five sense door averting. There is mind door averting or determining, and then there is attention as a Cittasika within each citta. Here, when we talk about attention, we're talking about the sense door averting, citta number 28. The object is a patch of color or a vibration. It's not the entire visual scene or a voice. Really want to focus here on sense door or sense objects. We're dealing with very, very primitive objects, like a spot of color or a bit of a vibration, not a picture, not a sound, just a patch of color, not this whole scene or a voice. Sense consciousness is passive, like a camera. It captures an impression without processing. So like when you take a picture of something, you just get it, the lens opens, the shutter opens, the lens presents whatever is out there to the film or to the light sensor, and it's a passive sensing activity. There's no processing, there's no analysis, there's no reaction. Sense consciousness is like that, just opening up and receiving. Okay, receiving will come next, but it is just simply opening up the shutter of the camera. Citta 17 arises with painful feeling. Citta 24 arises with pleasurable feeling. All the other cittas arise with neutral feeling. In the Abhidhamma, they list which Cittasikas are in which cittas, and of all of the cittas, these are the absolute simplest, most basic elemental cittas there are. They only have 7 Cittasikas: contact, feeling, perception, volition, one-pointedness, mental life faculty, and attention. That's it. They are the simplest of all possible cittas. So eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose, tongue, and body consciousness, they all have the most absolute basic set of the minimum set of cetasikas. The receiving consciousness that comes after that, it accepts the object into the mind for further processing. Its role is it's a transitional stabilizing role within the process. All right, so something happened at the eye or at the ear. Now you're going to bring it into the mind so that it can be further processed. Because at the eye, all that happens is receiving the opening up the shutter. Now you need to get it ready. It's a transition to and stabilizing the object to get it ready for later karma creating cittas. Here, your seven universe, you get the chittasikas involved in your seven universals that we just talked about. You get initial application, sustained application. In other words, the mind is applying itself to the object. In the sense consciousness, the mind is not applying itself at all to the object. Here, it is applying itself to the object. And you also get a chittasika called decision, which is the Pali term is adhimokkha. But it doesn't mean making a decision. It is very, very basic. It is other translations for adhimokkha are conviction or firmness, certainty, commitment, determination, resolution. In other words, fixedness. That's what's really happening here. So don't think of decision as thinking about it and analyzing it. No, it's just kind of zeroing in on it and stabilizing the object, the sense object. We now move to the investigating consciousness. Recognize its role is to recognize if the object is undesirable, neutral, or desirable. Remember, we talked about that earlier. That's the factor from the object that determine which stream do you go down. Do you go down the unwholesome resultant stream or the wholesome resultant stream? Undesirable leads to investigating consciousness number 19. If it's neutral, it goes to 27, which has a neutral feeling. If it's desirable, it goes to Citta number 26, which has a happy feeling. Okay. The role of investigating consciousness, it is part of the transition from bare awareness to karma creating reaction. Again, we're slowly transitioning, bringing it into the mental stream at receiving, now figuring out what type of object it is before we move to karma creating. It doesn't react ethically. It doesn't like or dislike. That occurs at karma creating. These cittas are rootless. They don't have they don't have a lobha, dosa, liking, disliking. They don't have accepting or liking, or detachment. They are simply functional, or so rather, without roots. Here you get your 19, Citta number 19, which is the unwholesome resultant, has exactly the same as the receiving, the seven universal, the initial application, sustained application, you're fixing on the object, and then the decision or conviction or firmness, all of that in number 19. Number 27, which is the investigating consciousness with neutral feeling, exactly the same. 26 is a little bit different. You here, because you have a pleasant feeling, you also get the zest or the enthusiasm that goes with the pleasant feeling as a cettasika. But it's so basic, so fundamental. It's not something where you say, oh, I like this. No, it's very, very basic. All right. So, sorry. Any questions on the investigating consciousness? Or the sensing, the whole sensing thing. Okay. All right. I see that it's 10 after 12. We started a little late, so I don't mind running a little bit late. But to be honest with you, the really big part is the next one. Next one, determining, it's a huge topic. And so I'm going to delay it until next class. So any questions on what we've covered so far? Like, in other words, overall, the Citta chart, life continuum, adverting, or sensing? Okay. All right. So if somebody could read the reflections.
Okay, I will do the reflection. Let us recall to our mind this morning. We come to the temple with the sole purpose to study the Dhamma. We go faith Sada and wise extension Sati, we learn and understand some of the Lord Buddha teaching. Whenever there is any doubt or wrong understanding of the teaching, we seek to clear our doubts and strengthen our views. With a proper understanding of the Dhamma, we can now put it into practice. The right understanding of the Dhamma will produce right thoughts that in turn give rise to right action, right speech, and right livelihood. With such a right frame of mind, we can face the reality of life. May the merits punya we gain through listening to the Dhamma, discussing on the Dhamma, and strengthening our view help us in overcoming any difficulty we may face. May all beings inhabiting space and earth, Devas and Naga of mighty powers, rejoice in this merit we have acquired, and may they long protect the Buddha Sasana. May this merit be a contributing cause for realization of Nibbana. Inam me punya Nibbana pacaya hotu. Sadhu. Three sadhu to Mother Rock for the Dhamma sharing this morning. Sadhu,
Sadhu.
Okay, I can guarantee you that next class will be more practical and more interesting once we start getting into the determining and comma creating. All right, looking forward to it. So chat again in 2 weeks.